Last time we studied that triatomic molecule fully described by 9 coordinates. For 3 coordinates represents the center of mass, and 2 coordinates represents the orientation of the molecule, and 4 coordinates are related to the vibration coordinate. Today we are focusing on this vibrational coordinate. How can we define this vibrational coordinate? So I already distributed this handout last time. Consider these triatomic molecules. Each atom are connected by string with force constant K. And first, we are going, for simplicity, we are going to restrict the motion is only one dimensional. So these molecules are fully described by only 3 coordinates: x1, x2, x3. Only 3 coordinates are needed to describe the motion of this molecule because we restrict the motion only in one dimension. Now we are going to apply Newton's equation F equal ma for each atom. So first, I'm going to apply this Newton equation for first atoms. So for first atom, mass is small m equal, according to Fuchs law, this is the first term. So this is the first Newton's equation for first particle, and I'm going to apply this Newton equation for third particles. We need minus sign because in this case force is on the left side. Now I'm going to apply this Newton equation on the large m. There are 2 forces from the x1 and from the x3. So the equation looks like this. This is the Newton equation for this system. But we are going to solve this equation, but this equation is complicated because this equation is coupled. For example, for the first equation, 2 variables are involved, x1 and x2. For the second equation, all the variables are involved. So this equation is coupled. So to solve this equation, we are going to introduce new coordinates. So this equation are expressed as in terms of x1, x2, x3. Now I'm going to introduce new variable q1 and q2 and q3. And we are going to rewrite this Newton equation in terms of these new coordinates. To transform from the old coordinate to new coordinate, we are going to introduce matrix XS. This is our strategy. So anyway, in first step, I'm going to rewrite this Newton equation in matrix form. In matrix form, this Newton equation looks like this. It is handout. This is the matrix form of this Newton equation. So I will call this matrix M, and I will call this matrix as mass K, this matrix X. This matrix is X double dot. This is the multiplication in the matrix form. Now, this matrix M and this matrix K share some important characteristic features. This matrix and this matrix, according to mathematicians, is symmetric matrix. It is symmetric. Minus k, 0, 0, minus k. Both matrices are symmetric. And according to mathematicians, when two matrices are both symmetric, they always can find matrix S. This matrix is very, very important. Why? As I said earlier, our strategy is that we are going to introduce new coordinate Q1, Q2, Q3. To transform from old coordinate to new coordinate, we are going to introduce matrix S. This matrix is exactly this matrix. And according to mathematics, they always find this matrix S such that this S matrix has following properties. We have matrix M and K. And first, I'm going to multiply by S transpose on the left. And I'm going to multiply S on the right by S. Then we obtain new matrix. And according to mathematicians, this is diagonal. This is very important. As I said before, initially, these two matrices is not diagonal. This matrix is symmetric matrix. This is symmetric, but not diagonal. But we always find matrix S. Using matrix S, this MK matrix can be diagonalized. This is very, very important. But according to mathematicians, they can always find this matrix S. S can make matrix M and K diagonalized. But this is a mathematically proven fact. This matrix is very, very important. So, given that we find S, then this matrix equation transform like this. So, I'm going to multiply on both sides by ST. Okay. When you multiply on both sides on the left ST, this matrix equation looks like this. And I'm going to define new variable Q in this way. From X, we are going to introduce new variable Q using matrix S. Then this X can be rewritten as SQ. So X double dot can be SQ double dot. So this is our new equation. This is old equation in terms of X. This is new equation in terms of Q. In this equation, matrix M and matrix K is not diagonal, just symmetric. But in this equation, STKS, STMS is diagonal. This is a big difference. These two matrices is not diagonal, but these two matrices is diagonal. This is very, very important. And according to mathematicians, they can always find asymmetries that this make these two matrices diagonal. So because these two matrices is diagonal, when you expand this matrix, the equation is decoupled. So this is not a mathematical class. I find S. So in your handout, I present the ST. So specific form as is like this. For our specific case, S is this one. So using this S, this one looks like this one. And important point of diagonal is 0, right? Similarly, when you calculate ST KS, it looks like this. 2K blah blah blah, but off diagonal is 0. This is a main result. Anyway, using this formula, this equation looks like this. You don't have to memorize this formula. There's a complicated formula here. And Q1, Q2, Q3. Here, important point is that only diagonal term survives. Only diagonal term survives. Off diagonal term is 0. This is important point. So this is our new formula. Now I'm going to expand this matrix form again. So first equation, this one looks like this. Q1 double dot. This term here. And this term is 0. This is the first equation. Now second equation, this one, 2m Q2 double dot equal, this one looks like this. This is the second equation. And third equation are complicated, but simply looks like this. Blah 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 Q3. This is our equation in terms of Q1, Q2, Q3. This is our new equation. You may recall this is our original equation. In original equation is coupled. In first equation, x1 and x2 is involved in terms of x1, x3. But this new equation are expressed in terms of q1, q2, q3. But in first equation, only q1 variable is involved. In second equation, only q2 variable is involved. In third equation, only q3 variable is involved. So this equation is now decoupled. So we can solve this equation. How we obtain this decoupled equation? Because off diagonal is 0. Because in both matrix, off diagonal is 0. So equation is decoupled. So now we can solve this equation. Now solve first equation. The first equation Q1 double dot equal 0. Simple. Second derivative is 0. So general solution for Q1 is equal to, general solution looks like this. This is constant. So Q1 is a linear function of time. So when you plot the graph, it looks like this. This is the first solution, general solution of Q1, linear function of time t. Now, turn to the second equation. When we rearrange this equation, it looks like this. And 2 cancel. 2 can be cancelled. Then you may look familiar with this equation. This equation describes situation in its harmonic oscillator. Mass M is attached to spring with force constant K. This equation describes this situation, harmonic oscillator. So the solution for this harmonic oscillator, you are familiar with this equation. Oscillating. This is a characteristic frequency. This is a phase shift. So when you solve this equation, it is oscillating function. When you plot this function, it looks like this. It oscillates between positive value and negative value. It is different from Q1. In Q1, this is a linear function. It increases with time. But Q2 function oscillates periodically, plus value, minus value, oscillation function. And similarly, this coefficient may be complicated, but basically it is a simple harmonic motion, similar structure. So when you solve this equation, it looks like same pattern, harmonic oscillation function. So Q3 also oscillates function with different frequency and different phase. So when you plot the graph, it looks like this. Same oscillating function, but different frequency. This is our solution. Now, this is mathematics, not chemistry. Chemistry begins now. The important question here is that what we have done is this. Initially, we described the system is described in terms of x1, x2, x3. We introduce new coordinate q1 and q2 and q3. Important question is what this coordinate really means. What is the physical meaning of this coordinate? To introduce new coordinate, we introduce special matrix x, s. So the equation looks like this. So to understand the physical meaning of Q1, Q2, and Q3, I will set Q1 equals 0, and Q2 equals 0, and Q3 equals 0. And what happens to x1, x2, x3? To understand the physical meaning of Q1. To understand the physical meaning of Q1, I'm going to set Q1 equals 0, and Q2 0, Q2 0, and going to see what happens to x1, x2, x3. So for S, x1, x2, x3, q1, q2, and q3, and S was 1, 1, 1, 0, minus 1, 1. 1. This is the matrix S. and I'm gonna give you concrete example. So I'm gonna set this was our example. To give you one concrete example, I'm gonna set you specific value for large m equal 4, small m equal 1. For this is 4, this equal 1. So this is minus 0.5. This is our example. So to get a fully understand the physical meaning of Q1, I'm gonna set Q1 equal 1, Q1 equal 1, and Q2 equal 0, and Q3 equal 0. Then what is the X1, X2, X3? This is our question. This is X1, X2, X3. When Q1 equal 1 and Q2, Q3 equal 0, what is X1, X2, X3? So in this case, X1 equal 1, X2 equal 1, X3 equal 1. Right? When 1, 0, 0 means this value returns. So when Q1 equal 0, Q1 equal 1, Q2 and Q3 equal 0, it returns X1, X2, X3, 1, 1, 1. So this arrow moves right by 1. This arrow moves right by 1. This arrow moves right by 1 when Q1 equal 1. Now what happens when Q2 changes to 2? Then this value returns 2, 2, 2. When Q1 changes from 1 to 2, it moves right by 2, moves right by 2, moves right by 2, right? Now what happens? Q1 equal minus 1. Then this value returns minus 1, minus 1, minus 1. So in this case, when Q1 equal minus 1, this arrow moves left by 1, left by 1, left by 1. So what the variable Q1 means? In every case, all the arrows move all together by same amount in the same direction. When Q changes, all the arrows moves by the same amount in the same direction, right? And furthermore, as I said before, Q increase linearly with the time, linearly within time. So when you follow this function, these arrows moves to the right, translationally, right? So this coordinate, this Q1 coordinate can be called translational motion. The physical meaning of this coordinate called translational mode, right? Now turn to the second coordinate Q2. To understand the meaning of Q2, I'm going to set Q1 equal 0, Q3 equal 0, and Q2 equal 1. Then what is the X1, X2, X3? In this case, 0, 1, 0 returns this value, 1, 0, minus 1. 1, 0, minus 1. So in this case, this arrow moves right by 1. And this arrow does not move, 0. This arrow moves left by 1. Right? Now, when Q2 becomes minus 1, what happens to this value? In this case, minus 1, 0, plus 1. So in this case, when Q2 equal minus 1, this arrow moves left by 1. This arrow moves right by 1. Right? And furthermore, Q2, what's the time dependence of Q2? Q2 is oscillating function. Plus minus oscillation. So when Q2 oscillate at specific frequency, this atom moves in this like this way. When Q2 changes periodically, atoms move in this way. So this motion may be called symmetric stretching. This one may be called symmetric string vibrational mode. Finally, turn to Q3. To understand the meaning of Q3, I'm going to set 0, 0, 1. So it return value 1 minus 0.51. So in this case, the atom moves this way. 1, move right by 1, move left by 0.5, move right by 1. And furthermore, Q3 also oscillate plus minus. So atoms move here, like compress, this one stretch, oscillate. So this mode may be called asymmetric stretching. So we can give physical meaning of each vibrational code. So this one is translation. You may recall that CO2 has 3 kinds of vibrational motion. First one is symmetric stretching. The second one is asymmetric stretching, and third one. What is third one? Third one is bending. But where is bending? Where is bending? Bending is not appear in our calculation. Why? Because it lies in the assumption. Initially, we assumed that the molecule only moves in x direction. This is our assumption. So in this assumption, bending mode cannot be occurred. So if we do not assume that the molecule is not in 1 dimension, but when the molecule moves 3 dimension, this coordinate extends 9 coordinates are required. So we obtain 9 coordinates will be returned, and 3 of them may be translational coordinate, 2 of them is rotational coordinate, and 4 corresponds to symmetric stretching, asymmetric stretching, bending mode will be occurred. So, but the matrix may be 9 by 9 matrix will be obtained. Now, so anyway, carbon dioxide has symmetric stretching, asymmetric stretching, and bending mode. Now, I'm gonna take into the detail of the Raman spectrum. Symmetric stretching is Q2, Q3. Now, when Q2 equals 0, the molecule looks like this. And Q2 equal plus 1, as I said before, the atoms moves in this direction. So molecular shape looks like this. Right? When Q equal minus 1, atom moves in this direction. So the molecular shape looks like this. Okay. When Q equals 0, molecule looks like this. When Q equal plus 1, molecule stretch. When Q equal minus, molecule compress. Now I'm gonna plot the polarizability as a function of Q. When Q2 equal plus 1, molecular size increase, so the polarizability is large. When Q equal minus 1, molecules compress, so molecular size decrease. So this one. When the Q equal 0, it is equilibrium, so polarizability is in the middle. So when you plot the polarizability as a function of Q2, it may be look like this. This is the polarizability as a function of Q2, which is the symmetric stretching coordinate. Now I'm going to draw slope derivative d alpha dq is not 0, right? Because this is increasing function. So this mode is Raman active. As I said before, for Raman to be active, this derivative is not 0. So this mode satisfies Raman selection rule. So symmetric stretching mode is Raman active, right? Raman. You can observe Raman spectrum. Now turn to the Q3, which is asymmetric stretching. This is equilibrium. And Q3 equal plus. When Q equal plus 1, this one compress, this one stretch. So molecule looks like this. When Q3 equal plus 1, when Q3 equal minus 1, this bone stretch, this bone compress, this bone stretch. So molecule looks like this. Okay, this is the molecular shape when Q3 equal minus 1. This is the molecular shape Q3 equal plus 1. Now assume that the polarizability of the molecule at Q3 equal 0 is this one. Now compare the polarizability of this molecule with this one. Compare the polarizability of these two shapes. Actually, polarizability of these two shapes must be same, right? So when you pull out the polarizability function, it looks like this because two polarizability must be same. So polarizability function is symmetric about y-axis. So when you draw the slope derivative, in this case, it is equal to 0, right? So this one does not satisfy Raman selection rule. So in this case, this mode does not shown in Raman spectrum because derivative is 0, right? Now go to bending motion. I will call bending motion Q4. When Q equal plus 1, molecular shape looks like this. Carbon atom moves upward, oxygen atom moves downward. This is the Q1 plus 1. When Q equal minus 1, carbon atom moves downward, oxygen atom moves upward. So this is the molecular shape where Q4 equal minus 1. This is the molecular shape where Q4 equal minus 1. Now compare the polarizability of these two shapes. Similar to asymmetric stretching, polarizability of two shapes must be same. So polarizability function looks like this. Similar to same as the asymmetric stretching mode. So when you draw the derivative, also 0. So bending mode is not shown on Raman spectrum either. So only symmetric stretching mode is shown on Raman spectrum. Now, what happens to IR spectrum? In IR spectrum, this stretching mode does not shown in IR spectrum because this dipole moment and this dipole moment cancel exactly each other. So symmetric stretching mode is not shown in IR spectrum. But in asymmetric stretching mode, this bond dipole moment does not cancel this dipole moment. So in this case, asymmetric stretching mode is shown on IR spectrum. For bending mode in IR spectrum is shown. This is our result. For CO2 molecule, we have three kinds of vibrational mode. Symmetric stretching mode, Raman active, IR inactive. Asymmetric stretching and bending mode, Raman inactive, but IR active. This is our result. This phenomenon is called mutual exclusion. Raman active mode is not shown in IR active mode. IR active mode is not shown Raman mode. This is called mutual exclusion principle. But every molecule does not apply mutual exclusion principle. Only molecules who have inversion center, which is symmetric about the origin. In this case, mutual exclusion principle is only applied. For example, this molecule has also inversion center. This molecule also applies mutual exclusion principle, same as CO2 molecule. But this molecule, CO2 molecule does not have inversion center. This molecule, this rule does not apply. So the CO2, H2O molecule has three vibrational mode. All of three vibrational mode, Raman active. All of three IR mode is IR active. Only molecules who has inversion center, such as acetylene and CO2 molecule, applied mutual exclusion principle. But this molecule does not have inversion center. This molecule does not apply mutual exclusion principle. Okay, this is Raman spectroscopy. Okay, let's move on to another topic. Chemistry usually treated the chemical bond as a spring. So, if the molecule are described fully, perfectly by harmonic oscillator, the potential energy 1/2 kx square. So, when you put the potential into Schrödinger equation, the energy, vibration energy, quantized like this. So energy level looks like this, equally spaced. This is the result. But as you know, this potential energy cannot explain bond dissociation energy. So harmonic oscillator model cannot explain bone dissociation energy too. So to explain bone dissociation energy, this potential must be modified to anharmonic potential. In anharmonic potential, this part is levels off, flattens out. This is the real potential of our molecule. So in this case, we can define bone dissociation energy from here to here. This is the bone dissociation energy. And furthermore, when this potential is put into Schrödinger equation, energy level also changes. The energy level looks like this. In harmonic oscillator model, the energy spacing is evenly spaced, same amount. But as you can see in this picture, the energy spacing decreasing continuously, progressively closer to each other. This is anharmonic potential energy. So in principle, how do you measure bone dissociation energy? In principle, you add up all the energy spacing. You add up all the energy spacing indefinitely, then you can obtain bone dissociation energy. So, in principle, let's say this bone dissociation energy plotted as this one, and this bone dissociation energy plotted like this, and this bone dissociation energy plotted like this. So when you draw, then you can draw right triangle. So when you add up all the transition, you can obtain bone dissociation energy. This plot is called Birdsponer plot. Especially the mathematical form of this anharmonic potential is usually use Morse potential. Generally used potential for anharmonic potential is called Morse potential, which looks like this. When this potential is put into Schrödinger equation, when this Morse potential is put into the Schrödinger equation, you obtain this energy level. The result is that the energy level spacing is continuously decreasing. This is the result. So when you add up all the energy level spacing, you finally obtain bone dissociation energy. Okay, turn to the next page. In absorption spectroscopy, this is a cuvette. Sample is placed in the cuvette, and the light intensity of I0 directed at the sample, and transmitted light intensity I is measured in the opposite side. And in absorption spectroscopy, we measure observance. This is the measured quantity. The observance is defined as like this. This is the definition of observance, which is observed in absorption spectroscopy. Then what is the unit of observance? There are no unit in observance because it is a definition of observance, so there are no unit. This is the definition of observance, and according to Beer-Lambert, this is equal to ECR. This is Beer-Lambert law. Here L is the path length. When the path length doubles, observance doubles. C is concentration. When the concentration doubles, observance also doubles. E is the molar absorption coefficient. Molar absorption coefficient accounts for the fact that different molecules absorb light to different extent under same condition, under same path length, same concentration. Different molecules of different absorb light different extent. Some molecules absorb strongly, some molecules absorb weakly. So molar absorption coefficient account for this fact. So when you rearrange this equation, I equal to I0 10 to the minus E times T times L. This is the Beer-Lambert law on the left side. Now, absorption process can be interpreted as a collision process between photon and molecule. Another picture of absorption. Absorption is a collision between photon and molecule. When photon collide with the molecule, photon disappears. This is the absorption. It is in the show, in the handout. Consider small slab. This is a molecule. Molecule has finite size and photon is directed on the left. The intensity of light is I. Here, left side L. The thickness is delta L. On the right side, position is L plus delta L. So, photon collide with the molecule, the photon absorbs, disappears. This process is absorption. When photon pass through the molecule, it is transmitted. So, transmitted light is I, L plus delta L. Initial intensity is IL. Consider the light intensity at IL is 100. Transmitted light is 90. Then, what's the meaning of I over delta I? In this case, 100 minus 10. Initial intensity is 100. Transmitted intensity is 90. So, delta I over I equal to 10 over 100. What's the meaning of this one? This is the probability that photon collide with molecule or absorption. This is the absorption probability or the probability that photon collide with the molecule. So how do you calculate the probability that photon collide with the molecule? Now this area is A, and the area of single molecule is called sigma. So the probability of the photon collide with the molecule is the area the molecule occupied. It is equal to sigma times number of molecules. The denominator is the total area the molecule occupies. This is the area of single molecule times the number of molecules. Here, this is the area, total area of A. This is the probability that photon collide with the molecule. How can you calculate the number of total molecule? Number of total molecule in the slab equal to density or concentration times volume. Right? Concentration is we call N. What is the volume? The area is A, and the thickness is delta L. The thickness of slab is delta L. So A times delta L is the volume of this slab. N is the concentration. So this is the total volume of the slab. So this is our equation. So A is cancelled, and delta I replaced by di. Delta I replaced by dl. I'm going to integrate both sides. So when you integrate on both sides, you obtain I equal I0 exponential minus n L. This is our final equation. The sigma is the area of single molecule. When sigma is large, the probability that photon collide with the molecule increase. So absorption increase. This sigma is called absorption cross section. Absorption cross section increase, the probability that photon collide with this molecule increase. So absorption increase. So it is related to absorption coefficient. Right? So compare these two formula. Compare this formula with the Beer-Lambert law. According to Beer-Lambert law, 10 to the minus E CL. This is the Beer-Lambert law. This is the absorption cross-section law. L is the path length. N is the concentration. So absorption cross-section is directly related to the molar absorption coefficient. But please note that . sigma is a molecular size which is called absorption cross section, but it does not mean that this is not the actual size of the molecule. This is the effective size. Effective size seen by photon. This is important. This is not the actual size of the molecule. This is the effective size seen by photon. Even though molecule is small, the effective size may be large. Small molecule can absorb light strongly, so it is different. This is not actual size. This is the effective size seen by photon. Okay, first part is ended. Now, Now, topic is NMR. I think NMR is one of the most important spectroscopic tools in chemistry. So this topic is very, very important. In NMR, we are going to probe proton. The spin state of proton is probed by NMR. So first, hydrogen atom are composed of proton and electron. As you know, electron has spin, and quantum number of spin is called S, and spin S is 1/2. And given S, we can define magnetic quantum number ms. Given S equal 1/2, ms has two possible values, 1/2 and -1/2. This state is called up spin. This state is down spin. So, and NMR probes proton, and proton has also spin. And the spin quantum number for proton is called I. And according to quantum mechanics, the spin quantum number of proton I is also 1/2. And given I, we can also define Mi, magnetic quantum number Mi. So Mi also has two values, 1/2 and -1/2. So for a moment, we are ignoring electrons. As you know, proton is a charged particle. This is up spin. This is down spin. Up spin. This is down spin. This is down spin. As you know, proton carries charge. Charged particle is spinning. And according to physics, when charged particle is spinning, it generates magnetic field. So it behaves like a tiny magnet. It is actually a magnet. But the direction of or orientation of magnet is depending on the spin quantum number Mi. For up spin, the magnet looks like this. For down spin, magnet oriented like this. But when the proton is in vacuum with no magnetic field, two spin states has same energy, even though the orientation is different. But when you apply magnetic field outside, external magnetic field is applied outside, the two spin state energy deviate. When strong magnetic, external magnetic is applied, the energy level depends on the orientation of the tiny magnet. Generally, upspin energy level get lowered, downspin energy get increased. The energy level depends on the strength of applied magnetic field, especially when B0, which is the strength of external magnetic field, 2.34 Tesla, the energy gap is known to be 100 megahertz. This is upspin, this is downspin, up, down. So NMR probe this transition frequency. This slope is called magnetogyric ratio. And it depends on the type of nucleus. This is the slope for nucleus. And frequently, chemistry also measure carbon-13 nucleus. For carbon-13, slope looks like this. This is carbon-13. This is proton. Slope is smaller compared to the proton. For carbon-13, the transient frequency is approximately 25 megahertz. So the transient frequency depends on the type of nucleus. So in the next page, I list the transient frequency of the various nucleus. For proton, 100 megahertz. When you apply 2.34 Tesla magnetic field is applied, transition frequency of hydrogen proton is 100 megahertz, carbon-13 25.2 megahertz, 19 fluorine 94 megahertz, blah blah blah. It depends on the type of the nucleus. Transition frequency is different. Okay. Now, as I said before, the slope depends on the type of the nucleus. Now, I'm going to explain how do we derive this formula. The ratio, how can we derive this ratio, gamma. This is nucleus. This particle has spin, and the spin, when the charged particle spins, it generates magnetic field. The magnetic field is characterized by the magnetic moment. This is the proportional to the magnetic field generated by this spin. When you apply magnetic field, this magnetic field interacts with this magnetic moment generated by the spinning nucleus. So magnetic energy, according to physics, it is equal to, follow this formula. This is the applied magnetic field. This is the magnetic moment generated by spinning nucleus. Then how do you calculate this magnetic moment? Magnetic moment is generated by spinning or rotating charged particle. So when charged particle rotate around the nucleus, so when the charged particle rotate about the nucleus, it has orbital angular momentum. So orbital angular momentum can also generate magnetic moment. This is orbital angular momentum. So according to classical physics, you can derive proportionality constant which connect two physical quantity. It is known to be E over minus 2me. This proportionality constant derived from classical physics, which connects between magnetic moment and orbital angular momentum. But there are another kind of angular momentum is discovered. Spin angular momentum. Spin angular momentum also generate magnetic moment. You might think that at first the proportionality constant may be same. But according to quantum mechanics, we need another factor which is called G factor. This factor comes from quantum mechanics. Okay. This factor cannot be explained from classical mechanics. This factor only comes from quantum mechanics. This is our result. And now nucleus also has spin I. Nucleus spin also generate magnetic moment. The proportionality constant is same. This is our formula. Now here we have minus sign because in this case electrons are rotating. But in this case nucleus is rotating, so there are no minus sign, plus sign. So mass is different. This is mass of electron, this is the mass of nucleus. And this is the G factor of nucleus. This is the G factor of electron. The factor different. The G factor depends on the type of nucleus. This is our formula. So I'm going to substitute magnetic moment here. Now in this formula, generally we apply magnetic field along the G direction. So this formula reduced to B0 because B0 is only G direction. Now G component of magnetic moment is this is my formula. Now we need the spin quantum of G direction, but you may remember that in atoms, angular momentum amplitude scale are restricted to L plus 1 h by scale. Angular momentum G direction are restricted to ml h bar. You may remember this formula. Similarly, spin angular momentum amplitude is equal to I plus 1 h bar scale. Spin angular momentum G direction is mi h bar. So we are going to use this formula here. Instead of Ig, we are going to use mi h bar. Now this one is called mu n. It's called O magneton. So energy is maybe expressed Gn mu n mi B0. This is called magnetogyric ratio. This is our formula. So this is the magnetic energy. Mi has two values, plus 1 over 2, minus 1 over 2. Please note that there is minus sign. So for up spin, quantum number is plus 1 over 2, but here's minus sign. So this is B0. For up spin, energy is lower because we carry minus sign. So up spin energy lowered. What is the energy? Gn mu n 1 over 2 B0. Right? For downspin, minus 1 over 2 minus, so energy increase. Energy is Gn mu n 1 over 2 B0. This is our equation. Then what is the difference between these two energy? Gn mu n B0. This is our main result. Okay, let's move on. Now, up to now, here's proton. When you apply magnetic field, the strength of magnetic field is 2.34 Tesla. You observe absorption peak at exactly 100 megahertz. This is our result. But there are electrons surrounds proton, right? This is important for chemistry. Electron surrounds proton. Now, when you apply magnetic field, the electron respond by generating its own magnetic field. Generally, the magnetic field generated by electron are oppose the original external magnetic field. So, the proton does not fully experience external magnetic field because the electric field generated by electron are oppose the original external field. So, the B local, which is the magnetic field actually experienced by proton, is less than B0. Smaller magnetic field is experienced by proton due to the electron. So this one is equal. This term accounts for the field generated by electron. Roughly speaking, sigma represents how many electrons surrounds proton. When the electron density around the nucleus increase, sigma increase. Then B local, which is the strength of electric field experienced by proton, decrease. So transfer frequency lowered. Understand? Without electron, absorption peak appears at exactly 100 megahertz. But actually, electron surrounds proton. Electron generate magnetic field which oppose external magnetic field. So the proton does not fully experience the external magnetic field. It feels reduced local field. So transfer frequency lowered. So actually, NMR spectroscopy measures the sigma. But what happens when proton is attached to fluorine? Fluorine is famous for electronegativity. Fluorine likes electron. Fluorine attracts electrons, withdraws electron from the proton. So now proton, there are no electron around the proton because fluorine remove electron from the proton. So the peak position approaches the 100 megahertz. Okay. So this is a basic principle of NMR spectroscopy. Now, in general, in NMR, in IR, microwave or UV visible, x-axis represents wavelength or frequency generally. But in NMR, it's different. In NMR, x-axis represents chemical shift, different unit. We use different unit to represent x-axis. What is chemical shift? Chemical shift is defined as this. Times 10 to the 6. Generally, when you measure NMR spectrum, you put reference as well as sample. This is the generally accepted procedure. When you measure the spectrum of sample, you always put reference of simultaneously. The transition frequency of sample is nu. Transition frequency of reference is nu0. So you measure two frequencies simultaneously, and you calculate the chemical shift. This is the x-axis for the NMR spectrum. This is the definition of chemical shift. Then the question is, why do we need nu0? Why do we need complicated procedure to measure the NMR spectrum? Why do we need this one? Because according to basic principle of NMR, transition frequency depends on the strength of magnetic field. It is not fixed. When there are no magnetic field, upspin, downspin has to degenerate. Then when you operate magnetic field, upspin lower, downspin increase. So when you apply 2.34 Tesla, the transition frequency is 100 megahertz. But when you apply 468 Tesla, the transition frequency increase to 200 megahertz. So transition frequency depends on V0. It is not fixed. It depends on the strength of the magnetic field. So this one is not fixed. So this one is problem. But when you measure delta, even if you increase V0 to 2V0, nu also go to 2 nu, doubled. Nu0 also doubled, 2 nu0. All the variable doubled. So doubled. It is exactly cancelled. So when you measure delta, which is chemical shift, this value is instrument independent. It does not depend on the strength of magnetic field because it is cancelled out. So we measure chemical shift instead of nu. And the usually used reference is a tetramethylsilane. The tetramethylsilane is usually used reference. This is a tetramethylsilane, which looks like this. Silane, tetramethyl. We use difference. We always put this reference to measure the NMR spectrum of sample. Okay. But even if we measured delta, nu0 is fixed. Nu0 is fixed, so delta increase when nu increase. So delta is directly related to nu. When nu increase, delta increase. Then what factor determine the nu? Nu depends on the how many electron surrounds proton. When electron density increase, what happens to nu? When electron density increase, proton experience small magnetic field. So transition frequency lowered, chemical shift lowered. But what happens when electronegative atom is attached? Then in this case, electrons are withdrawn from the proton. So proton experience stronger magnetic field. So transition frequency increase. So delta also increase, right? So this fact confirm experimental observation confirm this explanation. So according to the table, take a look at second table. We measured the NMR spectrum for proton for each molecule. Look at the series. The chemical shift of this methane 0.23, but the chemical shift of this molecule 7.26. Why the chemical shift of this molecule is very large? Because chlorine is electronegative atom. The three electronegative atom removes electron from the proton. So in this case, 3 chlorine atoms attracts or withdraws electron from the proton. So there are no electron around the proton. So proton experience fully electromagnetic field. So transition frequency increase. So the delta increase. So when you go from left to right, delta chemical shift increase. So this experimental observation confirms our explanation. In the third table, chemical shift for iodine. In this table, all the molecule has halogen atoms, but as you know, fluorine atom is the most electronegative atom. Fluorine atom withdraw most electron. So the electronegativity for this molecule, chemical shift for this molecule is highest. So input point is the last table. You can observe 3 peaks. Proton signal here, here, here. All 3 protons are in different chemical environment. The chemical shift for this proton is highest because right next to there are bromine atom, which withdraws electron density from the proton. Is 10.6. In this case, bromine is far away from the proton, so electron does not remove from the proton. So chemical shift is very small. But in this proton, bromine is right next to the hydrogen, so electron is withdrawn, removed from the proton. So electronegativity is very high. Chemical shift is very high. So we observe 3 peaks from this molecule. The next slide. There's a chemical formula C3H6 O2. For this molecular formula, I'm gonna determine the molecular structure. There are two possible structures are suggested. First structure is this one. Second structure are suggested. Two molecules has same formula. To determine which structure is right, we obtain NMR spectrum. This peak does not come from a sample. This peak comes from reference. So TMS peak this does not come from sample. So this peak comes from sample. So when you measure the NMR spectrum, two peaks appears. Then which structure agree with the does agree with the NMR spectrum? This compound agree with this NMR spectrum. According to this NMR spectrum, there are two proton exist. So this proton generate two peaks. How many peaks appears from this molecule? From this molecule, you would obtain 1, 2, 3. If this molecule gives NMR spectrum, 3 peaks would appear, right? Because 3 different protons which are in different chemical environment appears. So, according to NMR spectrum, the molecule may be this one. What happens if we measure this compound? How many peak appears in this compound? In this compound, only one peak appears. Why? These two protons are equivalent. Same proton, same environment. So you only obtain only one peak, right? But in this peak, these protons are in different environment with this environment. So two peak appears. But in this case, only one peak appears. Now let's move on another topic. Another molecule. How many peaks appears with this molecule? This proton may generate peak. This proton also generates second peak. This hydrogen atom are equivalent. So this hydrogen atom pick one band. This hydrogen peak also generate another peak. So when you measure NMR spectrum, obtain two peaks. 6, 4. So two band appears. But when you take a closer look at this peak, the peak at 6 p.m. are triplet. The peak around 4 ppm are doublet. This is the quick question. Why this peak is doublet? Why this peak around 6 p.m. is triplet? This is the question. Now, this peak comes from this proton. This peak comes from Hb proton. Now I'm going to explain first He proton. Now to measure the NMR spectrum, we are going to apply magnetic field. But for He proton, does not only feel magnetic field B0 external. It also generates magnetic field from this proton. Actually, this proton is also a tiny magnet. This is a spinning charged particle. This is also magnet. This proton also generates magnetic field. But as you know, there are two orientation of this magnet, up spin and down spin. So there are four possible ways. First one, when two spins up spin, then the HF proton feels external magnetic field will be zero plus two magnetic field due to HB must be added. So this magnetic field is transition occurs at the larger frequency because these two magnetic field must be added to B0. And second possibility is that two HB protons are downspin. In this case, the transition frequency may be lowered because this magnetic field opposes the external magnetic field. And third possibility is that this proton is upspin, this proton is downspin, and this proton is downspin, this proton is upspin. But in this case, this spin cancels this spin. So these two possible combination cancels exactly. So in this case, in this configuration, HA proton exactly feels B0 exactly. So in this configuration, peak split to triplet and 1 2 2 2 1 split it into 1 2 1 because there are two possible ways. Now turn to the HB proton. For HB proton also, we applied magnetic field, but HB proton also experience B0 and the magnetic field generated by HA proton. This is also magnet. But there are two possible ways, upspin and downspin. When spin state of H is upspin, the magnetic field must be added to a B0. So transition frequency is increased. When the HA proton is downspin, transition frequencies must be lowered. So two peak appears. So multiple structure is shown. Now the spacing in the between line, this spacing, what factor determines this spacing? Now, why this peak split? Because this proton generates magnetic field influence this proton. So, how strongly the HA proton interacts with HB determines the spacing in the multiple structure, right? How strongly this HA proton interacts with HB determines the spacing between two lines, right? Then what happens with this spacing? This spacing also how strongly HB proton interacts with HA proton. This one means how strongly HA proton interacts with HB proton. Same interaction, right? So this spacing must be same as this spacing, right? This spacing is called JAB. This is also JAB. This is called spin coupling. Constant. Save constant. Okay. Okay, this is the first part of NMR spectrum. Okay, let's end it here. Do you have any question? See you next time.